Good evening. I'm Jonathan Dewberry, the director of this production of the Harlem Opera Theater's Shuffle Along, Cecil and Blake's sensational 1921 musical that was a smash on Broadway and ran for a number of years, as well as tours around the country. So I welcome you to the Harlem Opera Theater's celebration of the 100th anniversary of Shuffle Along, 1921, when this musical was first presented in New York City. I thank you for your patronage and for supporting us this evening, and know that you will enjoy this performance, which has been put together by a strong, powerful collection of artists, musicians, and administrators and technical staff to make this possible for your enjoyment. Let's talk about the origin of Shuffle Along. It came from a comic sketch by the duo Aubrey and Lyles. And they were two black vaudeville comedians who put together Flournoy Miller and Aubrey Lyles a sketch that was called The Mayor of Dixie. And from this sketch, they collaborated with Noble Sissle and U.B. Blake, who wrote the music and the lyrics for what became Shuffle Along. The basic premise of this is set in Jimtown, which is a fictional black town where you have three men who are running for mayor: Sam Peck, Steve Jenkins, who are both partners and who own a grocery store, and Harry Walton, who is like the underdog in this community. In the midst of this story, there is a love story between Harry Walton and Jesse Williams, whose mother is the owner of the Jimtown Hotel, which is the hotel in Jimtown. In this production, what you will see, which is what audiences saw back then, was a different presentation of black characters on stage. Here you have store owners, hotel owners, a sort of middle-class black community. At points, you will see them in tuxedos, spats, women in evening dresses and gowns. So this was not the proverbial sort of country story of the servant class, the farmers, the maids, the cooks, the butlers, but a different perception of black people who are a little more sophisticated and dressed up. I should also point out with the two, Miller and Lyles, when they first did this production, right, they played the two lead roles, the Steve Jenkins and Sam Peck characters, and they were done in blackface, which was traditionally what black comedians had to don during this period to appear on the stage. We chose not to do that for this production, to focus more on the music and the story and the opportunity of what you're seeing. But do keep that in mind, that that was the context of this entertainment venue, was in blackface. So what you will see here then is a production where you have a smart, somewhat sophisticated community, as well as some people who are not as educated, but they're still part of the community, which represents all aspects, in this case, of the black community, not just the poor, but the working class, the middle class as well. So this production will illustrate that. And we're doing it with just 9 actors, not a full-fledged chorus. So you will see actors who are doubling and in some places tripling roles in what they're bringing to life with these characters. Also, the musical styles of this period that we see. Jazz was king in the early 1920s. And this musical depicts that, as well as blues and some classical traditions that you will also hear in the music, which is part of the background and the training for Noble and Cecil as well. So keeping these aspects in mind, we also want to talk about the context of this period. It was not usual to see Black performers in this sophisticated, dressed up look. And as I said, it was further uptown at the 63rd Street Theater, which is where Shuffle Along premiered, which was way uptown in what is now 63rd Street between what is now Lincoln Center and Central Park. So for the first time, you had white audiences who were coming further uptown to see this new show. So much so that they had to make 63rd Street a one-way street because there was so much traffic coming in and out. Plus, it allowed the opportunity for Black audiences to sit in the orchestra, which was also a big deal, that if theaters even allowed Black people, they usually sat in the balcony. So with this production, which was Black musical directors, Black musicians, singers, dancers, a full Black production of Black artists and musicians coming together. This sort of represented a lot of changes that would influence the theater later on with Black performers. And also in this period, I also want to point out the context that in 1921, in the midst of Shuffle Along, we were coming out of the end of World War I, which ended in 1918. Women had just got the right to vote in 1920. And there was a whole lot of social, political movings and goings on around the country that the country was celebrating, trying to sort of get away from the drugs of the war. Plus, the flu epidemic of 1918 still had lingering effects in 1921. So there was also that to deal with. There were a lot of new inventions, mainly the electric stoplight. Because keep in mind that prior to this period, you just had police officers who would have a stop sign or a contraption to sort of control the traffic, stop and go. There was no stop light as we know it. So this was a big innovation. And you will see one of the numbers in our production that takes place on a street where there's a police officer who has a stop sign and a whistle. So these kind of innovations were a big deal in the 1920s. Politically, we were dealing with a lot of racism and pushback from the Black men who had fought in World War I and now had come home to America and faced further racism, segregation, lynchings across the country in the North and South. The Ku Klux Klan, otherwise known as the KKK, was rampant throughout this period. In the midst of this, you had Black performers who were still trying to represent the culture, the music on the stage around the country. And this opportunity was very unique. It wasn't the first time that we had a Black show that was in New York that was not in Harlem. Williams and Walker, the great musical comedy team, back in the late, around 1908, 1909, 1910, had a production, not exactly on Broadway, but it was in New York City, right, which was called In Dahomey, which was very successful. And that focused more musically with, at that time, with ragtime, that sort of Scott Joplin period. So the 1920s, that next decade, gave us jazz and syncopated jazz, rhythm that you could dance and sing to. So this musical captures that. So we ask that you sit back, enjoy these 9 actors and musicians who have worked hard to present to you this production, to give us a taste, a concert version of what this production might have sounded like and looked like a bit back then. So we thank you once again for your patronage. We know that you will enjoy what you will be seeing and hearing. Feel free to join us. We are definitely still accepting donations for the continuance of the Harlem Opera Theater. We thank you. We know you enjoy it. So sit back, come along with us, and shuffle along.
for everything that we can get. Jenkins is for the country going wet. We'll bring back the whiskey, beer, and gin. You know that Steve Jenkins will win.
The great of Steve Jenkins, a lame and hungry bunch. He's going to bring back the farce and beer and lunch. If he's elected, it sure will be a sin. We hope that he'll never ever win. The great of
Stand
Steve
for
Jenkins, a
everything
lame
that
and
we
hungry
can
bunch.
get. Jenkins is for the country going wet. We'll bring back the whiskey, beer, and gin. You know that Steve Jenkins will win.
Is coming with whistling, fife, and drumming. Let's clear the way for a great big demonstration. Then came the day with the riotous consternation. Me, him, and she, him, and me. We're the ones who will elect for our mayor. We'll have some pet. We'll agree that me, him, and she will take them, bring them, shake them, just be free. She, but they're funny. She, him, and me. It's for thoughts of Bonnie, such a sight to see. For her class army, ain't a 1, 2, 3, but a bunch of heads like Olds and Patty, him, and she. We're for Harry Walton, here we come. We're for Harry Walton, our favorite son. And we're murder going, we will soon be showing. If we keep this step with a hat, right on the road. Honor is our platform, rise and grand. Justice is our platform, on which we stand. And since we are Amish, we are for the women. Harry Walton is our man. He is our man, our Speech!
Friends and citizens of Jimtown, it is useless for me to attempt to tell you what kind of a man Harry Walton is. And that he is the right man for the mayor.
Yes, he is.
For no doubt, you all know as well as I. In fact, we've watched him grow from boyhood.
He is the man.
He is the man.
His honesty, integrity,
Yes, sir.
and efficiency make him the logical man for the office. And it is the solemn duty of each and every citizen of Jimtown to vote for him, for he's all right.
He is all right.
Who's all right?
Harry Walton's all right.
Hooray! Mother, your speech was brief and to the point. And you're right. Harry Walton is the right man.
Well, daughter, no doubt some may say that my efforts in his behalf are prompted by the fact that he is to become my son-in-law. But my only motive is to see the right man in the right place.
And Harry is the right man.
Well, I trust my daughter is looking at it through unbiased eyes and not because she is to become the future Mrs. Harry Walton.
Oh, Mother.
Oh, did I tell on you?
Oh. I see after Harry's been elected, there seems to be a certainty that there is going to be a little wedding.
Oh no.
Oh, it's all right. I've known it right along. But none of that wedding stuff for me, kid.
Why not, Ruth?
Because I'm just simply too full of jazz. Everybody thinks I'm crazy. They say I've got plumbing. Everybody thinks I'm hazy. Lost all the sense I ever had. When they see me shake, it makes them shiver when I do a break. It makes them
That's fine and dandy. My boy, it behooves you to win. For if you are beaten by either one of those ignoramuses, Steve Jenkins or Sam Peck, who would run our town like they run their grocery store, I shall never consent to you becoming my son-in-law.
But Miss Williams,
And that is final.
Harry, you can't lose. Why Jenkins or Peck beating you? Why that idea is just absurd.
I know, Jesse, I know, but just suppose for a second.
Come now and don't let your faith weaken. Let's keep this love fire burning bright.
Your love for me is a heavenly beacon, guiding me through love's darkest night.
Don't start nothing, no found nothing. No matter how dark would have been wrong. Fate won't hurry, we won't worry. We'll just keep our hearts aglow.
Love will find a way. Those skies now are gray. Love like ours can never be ruled. Cupid's not so that way. Try it still tonight. Clouds will soon roll by. Though fate may lead us astray, my dearie, mark what I say. Love will find the way. Love will find the way. Those skies now are gray. Love like ours can never be ruled. Cupid's not so that way. Try it still tonight. Clouds will soon roll by. Though fate may lead us astray, my dear, mark what I say. Love will find a way.
Good morning, Mrs. Peck. You sure look like a flapper this morning.
Good morning.
Have you any influence over your husband at all?
Of course, I am his wife.
Well, why don't you get him to withdraw from this race then?
I'll have him withdraw only on one condition.
And what's that?
That is, if Steve Jenkins does.
Oh, ain't that ridiculous? Steve Jenkins was nominated by the political machine. And your husband, Sam Peck, why, he's running on an independent ticket. Can you beat that? An independent ticket?
Well, my husband has always been independent.
Well, I know. But it seems to me that he would help Steve Jenkins to win, inasmuch as they are partners in Jimtown's most prosperous store.
No, just store, not prosperous.
Well, can't you see he's just splitting the ticket? He hasn't got a chance to win. Get him to give up.
I don't want him to give up.
And why not?
Because if he is elected, then I will be the first lady of the town.
Oh, I thought there was a catch to it. Well, never mind. He will never be elected.
Never! Why not?
Because Tom Sharper is the political boss of Jimtown. And my candidate, Steve Jenkins, will be the next mayor.
Never. You have asked me 2 or 3 times to get my husband to withdraw. But I'll wager you've never asked Mr. Walton to do so.
That old love-sick bird. He is the least of my worries.
I suppose so.
I come up in them good old man daddy days. Well, honesty was the best policy.
In those dear old bandana days, cane and cotton never forgotten bandana days, and their quaint old bandana ways. When a dance was cold and hard and mammies, they were sure some mash for Sammys. And in all their bandana plays, banjo strumming, baby humming, bandana days, and on that pale old boy, they swing left and right, those dear old bandana days. Why, the dearest days of my life were bandana days, oh, filled with trouble, and strife. Dearest memories we left always in those dear old bandana days. Cane and cotton never forgotten bandana days, and their quaint old bandana ways. When I danced for cold and out in memories, they were just some bashful Sammys. And in all their bandana plays, angel strumming, baby humming, bandana ways. And on that pale old side, they swing left and right in those dear old bandana days.
I don't want to hear that now.
I'm a man that knows everything. You ain't got no business being no mayor, and you knows you ain't. What you talking about
I
being
got
mayor?
just as much right to be mayor of Jimtown as you is. And much as far as that concerned. What you talking about I got no right to be mayor of Jimtown?
It takes brains to be mayor. You ain't got brains enough to have a decent headache. You just running against me because you're jealous of me. That's all you is. And me and you running a grocery store together too. Minute I think I got a chance of getting elected, you splits the ticket. That's what I get for taking you in the grocery store as my partner. I'd never taken you in the first
Now
place.
here, listen. Wait a minute. Let me get you straightened out about that there grocery store. I put just as much money in that store as you did. Maybe a little more. I don't know.
You ain't putting no more in it.
I mow out a good deal.
No,
more.
you ain't out.
Yes, I mow out. Don't tell me I mow out. But when it come to politics, that's where the friendship ceases right then and there. And here's another thing. I ain't about to let you run for mayor of Jimtown and not be some common folk. So get it out your head while you was at it.
Look, when I first started running, I says to you, I says, Sam, if I get selected mayor of Jimtown, I's gonna make you vice mayor.
The vice mayor?
Sure, that's a good job for you.
Why don't you offer me a job that amounts to something? Like the governor of the county or something like that. What can I do with a vice mayor's job?
You ain't got no business being nothing. You ain't even vote for yourself yet.
I can't vote for myself.
Anybody who's running for the office can vote for themselves.
No, they can't.
Don't tell me they can't. For I done voted for myself 4 times this morning.
Yeah, but I is in a very peculiar position. I is a Republican, and I'm running on an independent ticket. And I ain't about to go against the old party.
Steve! Oh. I have been looking all over town for you to make a speech. Now you need every vote you can get, so make it a good one.
Go ahead, Tom. Introduce me.
Fellow citizens, it gives me great pleasure in introducing to you Mr. Steve Jenkins, the people's candidate for mayor. Hear ye him.
And hear ye me. I is running just as well as he is. And I be's the best man.
That's right. That's right.
Here we is. Take your choice.
Ladies, gentlemen, people, and folks.
Oh, you ain't left nobody out. I give you credit for that.
Don't pay any attention to him, Steve. Go right ahead.
As I stand before you, gazing into each and every one of your eyes, the question that rises in my mind is, what y'all think of me?
Don't tell him.
Don't tell him.
Nah, don't tell him.
Can you imagine that guy disturbing this crowd? This is my candidate. This is your crowd, not his.
Oh, this is anybody's crowd. Man, go lay down.
I may not be bedecked with jewels and diamonds rare. I may not wear watches and chains, but I have worn
Balls and chains.
And calm yourself, son. Calm yourself.
Ladies, gentlemen, peoples and folkses. When I first entered this race for Mayor Jim Town, I had not the least idea that there was a dark horse in the race. Surprised I was. Very much heap surprised I was when I found out that that dark horse was my own business partner.
Now, say something.
Well, I might be the dog horse, but you ain't gonna never be no black man.
Listen to me, folks. Listen to me. We will pay no more attention to my opponents. We will ignore him and focus on matters heap much more importance.
Get to the point, Steve.
For instance, look at the condition of your city today. I say, look at the condition of Jim Towns today. We have no electric lights here.
You said it, Steve.
Tis the cause will show you that there ain't been electric lights in Jim Town, not since before.
Oh, they ain't never been none here.
And there wasn't any here before then either. What we need is electric lights.
Lots of them. Lots of them.
Look how dark it is in here.
Who? Oh.
Y'all looking at me for?
So dark in here that if you lit one match, you have to light another one just to see the first one that you lit. Makes me your mayor.
How about it, boys?
I see that everybody in Jim Towns gets lit up. I do more than that. I see that you all gets electrocuted.
You gonna kill everybody with all that, man? Come on, man.
What's the matter now? Steve, let Sam go.
You make the speech, Tom.
I can't make a... Ooh, ain't you a fine candidate for mayor? I spend one half the morning trying to get the crowd together, the other half walking them up one side of the street and down the other to find you to make a speech. And when you get to the most important part, you do a bonehead trick like that. Listen, Steve, you do know this is election day, and you are running for mayor.
Course, I know that. Why you always asking me that for? Look at here, Tom. Ain't Sam running for mayor same as I is? Didn't he follow that man same as I did? What is you talking about?
I know, but you can't compare yourself.
How come I can't?
Well, Sam is spending twice as much money as you in this election.
Spending twice as much money?
Yes. And he's away ahead of you.
I wonder where he getting that money from.
Didn't you just say that you two were partners in the same grocery store?
Yes, and that's just what I'm thinking. We're partners.
And your profits are the same?
Well, they ought to be, but maybe they ain't.
Yet you wonder why he's got twice as much money to spend than you.
Look at here, Tom. You don't mean that Sam is stealing from me, do you?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And he's been stealing from you ever since you two have been in business together.
What am I gonna do about it?
I have taken matters into my own hands.
Well, I'm glad of that, because you can catch him. I can't. You were slicker than I is.
Quite right. I have sent to New York for Jack Penrose, that great color detective. You leave old Sam to me. I'll fix him.
No. If you don't send for a detective, you gonna fix me. That's what you gonna do.
Listen, Steve, you don't understand.
Oh, I understand. You don't understand. I understand better than you do. You's the man who don't understand. I understand fluently myself.
Isn't there stealing going on in your store?
Yes. And he'll come down here and catch the wrong stiller. He ain't just gonna come down here and watch Sam. He gonna lock up the first man he catch stealing.
Why, of course.
Well, I can't take no chances like that, huh?
You can't.
No.
Listen, Steve. I am hiring the detective to watch Sam, not to watch you.
Oh, he gonna watch the man we want him to watch.
Why, of course. Ain't he our detective? But listen, it's going to take plenty of money to do this.
Well, if he come down here and watch Sam and keeps his eyes off me, you can have all the money you want.
Fine. That's all I wanted to hear you say.
All I want you to do is make sure I get elected. And if you do, I's gonna dance at your wedding.
Ooh, and there will be a wedding just as soon as you is elected.
Look at here now, Tom. Who you gonna marry?
Why, Emmeline.
Who's she?
Everybody loves Emmeline. She's the gal that all the fellas hang around.
I don't know who she is.
Everybody knows Emmeline. She's the pal of every other gal in town.
Watch out.
And every pal and gal will still be singing the blues when they hear the latest news in Honeysuckle Town.
Well, what her mama look like?
Sweet Emmeline.
Is her daddy rich?
Said she'd be mine, and in the wedding line there'll be no hesitating, for the preacher will be waiting with an autumn time.
Oh, you are whipped.
With Debbie by my side. All the fellas will be jealous and feeling kind of rough when I come along with Emmeline, strutting my stuff. Hot dog, my soul's gonna knock them cold. Why, I'll be worth my weight in gold in honeysuckle time. When Emmeline said she'd be mine.
Lovesick puppy.
In the honeysuckle time. Sweet Emmeline said she'd be mine. And in the wedding line, there'll be no hesitating, for the preacher will be waiting with an autumn time. With Abby by my side. All the fellas will be jealous and feeling kind of rough when I come along with Emmeline, strutting my stuff. Hot dog, my soul's gonna knock them cold. Why, I'll be worth my weight in gold in honeysuckle time. When Emmeline said she'd be mine.
How dare you give me an argument?
Look, honey, I know what I'm talking about.
Never mind. I don't want you to stand around talking to these girls.
I got to talk to the women folks in order to get their votes, ain't I?
I'll solicit the women's votes. You get the men's.
No. If I can't talk to the women folks, then I'm sorry I'm running for the office.
Well, I'm not. Because if you are elected, then I get to run the town.
If I'm elected, you can run the town?
Of course. Ain't you my husband?
Yeah, I'm your husband.
Well, ain't I your boss?
My boss.
Ain't I? Ain't I?
Yeah.
Well, if you run the town and I run you, then don't that make me run everything?
Then all the power I get, That's the your power.
Imagine me, the leading light of the city, running things to suit myself. Why? The first law I'll pass will be to get rid of Jim Green's gambling part.
For what? That man ain't done nothing to you.
Oh, he's making too much money, and his wife, she's wearing such fine clothes. Why, she's snubbing everybody. But just you wait. My time is coming. I'll show her. I'll fix her. I'll show her.
I ain't even elected yet. And Steve, he getting just as many votes as I am.
And you know why? Because he's buying them. And you know where he's getting the money from? Right out of the cash register in your store.
Out the cash register?
Of course.
You mean he's stealing the money?
He's been stealing from you ever since you went into business with him.
Is that so?
Oh, yes, but he's through stealing now.
When did he die?
Sam,
Yeah?
I forgot to tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I sent to New York for that great colored detective.
No, honey, no.
Yes, dear.
No.
His name is Jack Penrose, and he's wonderful. He's wonderful, dear.
No, we don't need no detective running around at their grocery store.
He's stealing from you, isn't he?
That's fine. I'll catch him.
Well, shouldn't he be watched?
Listen, honey, let the man stay in New York. I know what I'm talking
Never
about.
mind. I've sent for him, and he'll be here today. So you should keep a lookout for him. And for heaven's sake, keep your mouth shut.
Can I see that? Oh, I'm running too. My name is Sam Peck. You probably haven't saw my building.
Say Sam.
Come on.
Sam, how about we go down here to the corner where there are a lot of men? We can get some votes down there.
You go on, honey. You get them all riled up. I'll be there in just a second. As I was saying.
Is that so? I think you'll be going this minute, Sam. Sam!
Yeah. Yes, I's coming.
And what did she have to tell you?
When my palm she ran, I asked her when I would wear, and she shook her head.
And then what did she say?
I don't know because I ran away. Now I got the gypsy blues.
And you're sorry that you did refuse.
To wait and listen to her gypsy news.
Maybe she was just in doubt.
Handsome man was trying to figure out.
And trying to find what it was about.
I would give half my weight in gold to know what she was about to tell me.
But if she would have said that you're sweet and you lose, they'd have to bury you.
Rather than to start a ruse.
Why you ran away and you got your dues. That's why you've got those empty gypsy blues. Gypsy blues.
Steve, old boy, the next mayor of Jimtown.
I knows I was gonna get elected. I knows it, I knows it.
Please accept my most sincere congratulations, old boy.
Oh, sorry you lost, Harry. Glad I won. Hey, Sam, come ride me all over town on your back. Give me up.
Young man, I'm sorry to inform you that you cannot claim my daughter's hand. But don't be dejected, since you are not elected. But by my word, I'm bound to stand.
Jane Williams is the one who always by her word will stand.
But why make them both unhappy when they love each other tenderly?
My word, I have pledged I will marriage. Come, Jessie, come with me.
Her word is pledged, she'll never hedge, but we all do not agree.
Just suppose they were lost once again.
Once again,
They were disposed of my husband, had mum, well, what then?
well, what then?
It is true what you say, but my word it must stay. Come, Jessie, bid Mr. Walton good day.
Harry, my heart is with you. Please do not give up in despair.
All hope seems to be in vain, dear.
Try to win your lady fair. True love will always find a way.
The darkest hour before dawning, where there is a will, there is a way. Listen to your heart's true calling.
Listen, listen.
Listen, and you will hear it say.
Why didn't you start dancing with me?
I told you to do the cootie. You turned around and did the shit. Look at it. You still do it.
Look at you.
Forget me. What? You know who I am. So I got your earring. Good morning, officer. When they let you out of jail? Say, let me ask you a question. About how much a week do you get paid for this here, job? That's what I want to know.
Shuffle along.
Shuffle along. Shuffle, what is that? I want to ask you a question. How much do you get paid for this job? And I reckon that.
Everyone in town is always singing this song. Shuffle along, shuffle along. Doctors, bakers, undertakers do a step that's full of step and syncopation. Shuffle along. Oh, shuffle along. Why, life's but a chance, and when times come to choose, if you lose, they'll start singing the blues.
Steve Jenkins takes his chair as the next mayor of Jimtown. My candidate. Oh, and I heard your mother objected to you marrying Harry inasmuch as he lost the election. And I am truly sorry for that indeed.
Well, that will never make any difference with Harry and me.
I hope not.
Never in the least.
That's fine.
It's just one fellow for me in this world. Harry's his name. That's what I claim. Why, for every fellow there must be a girl. I found my mate, my kindness of face. I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. For heavenly places of his kisses fills me with ecstasy. He's sweet, just like chocolate candy, and just like honey from a bee. Oh, I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. For heavenly places of his kisses fills me with ecstasy. He's sweet, just like chocolate candy, and just like honey from a bee. Oh, I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about him. Not doing love, he's just wild about me.
Wait a minute, Sam. What do you mean running up and down the street like that? Ain't you got no sense at all?
I was training for the chief of police.
Who?
The chief of police.
Where?
Here in Jimtown.
Who's gonna approach you?
You is.
Is I?
Now wait a minute. Don't you remember back there in that grocery store, right before the election, you said if you was ever appointed mayor, you was gonna make me chief of police. Do you remember that?
Oh, okay. I said that before I was elected.
Oh, there you is.
Well, if you ain't got no better sense than to pay attention to them election promises, you ain't got sense enough to be no chief of police. I tell you that now.
So that be the case?
That am the case. You ain't gonna be nothing in Jimstown.
Is I fit?
You bet your life you fit.
Can I whip anybody here?
You can lick anybody in the bunch.
No one is receptive.
You can lick anyone over there. Now let's go.
Give him them gloves. Give him them gloves.
Oh. You gonna fight me for the job. Is that it?
Well, the job is worth me having. It's worth me fighting for.
Well, if you whips me, then I'm gonna make you chief of police.
Oh, you ain't got to worry about that. If I whips you, I was gonna be the chief of police.
Well, you better send word home that you ain't gonna be there for dinner, because I'm gonna arrange for you to go right past your door.
Well, you know that I'm the man that was born with these boxing gloves on.
Attaboy, boy.
And it sure looks like you gonna die the same way.
What? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's go. Mammy, I'm feeling tired and weary. My heart is heavy laden too. Mammy, there's only one who can cheer me, and that only one is you. So won't you sing me to sleep, dear Mammy, with the hush of my own pickaninny tune, just like you did in Alabama. Mammy, let me hear you. Go to sleep, my honey. Sandman's coming soon. He's watching you up yonder in the moon. And when I go to sleep in your arms, I know I'm safe from earthly harms. So won't you sing me to sleep, dear Mammy, with the hush of my own pickaninny tune? Oh, won't you sing me to sleep, dear Mammy, with the hush of my own pickaninny tune, just like you did in Alabama? Mammy, let me hear you go to sleep, my honey. Sandman's coming soon. He's watching you up yonder in the moon. And when I go to sleep in your dear arms, I know I'm safe from earthly harms. So won't you sing me to sleep, dear Mammy, with the hush of my own pickaninny tune? Hello, dearie, I'm feeling kinda blue.
Hello, dearie, I'm feeling lonesome too.
But I'm trying with all my energy to be the strong-hearted boy you want me to be.
But dear, you must resist each growing sentiment.
How can I exist and without you be content, when in the blue of the skies I see the blue of your eyes? In the thrilling song of the bird, your voice is heard. It thrills me, stills me with love's anguish, fills me. In the white fleur-de-lis, an emblem of your purity. And when the bee sips the wine, I feel your lips touch mine. The breath of a rose, your perfume tresses disclose. Everything reminds me of you, you. Everything reminds me of you. In the blue of the sky, I see the blue of your eyes. In the thrilling song of the bird, your voice is heard. It thrills me, stills me with love's anguish.
Steve Jenkins is the type of a man that you advocate for the mayor of Jimtown?
Now, Mrs. Williams.
Well, I'm surprised, a man with your standing.
Mrs. Williams.
Oh,
let-
dry up, young man, dry right up. Don't you try to tell me my business. I'm one of the oldest citizens of Jimtown, a taxpayer, and have a perfect right to know why the city money's being so foolishly spent. Who in the world ever heard of a city paying for the mayor's valet? What right have we to pay for these 5 stenographers? And look at this office. Look at this office. Does it look like a mayor's office? I shall say not. It looks like some old woman's home.
But you must admit, Mrs. Williams, the mayor has some very beautiful stenographers.
Beautiful and minus ability. Why, every one of them would have to have their fingers cut off before they could write shorthand. See here, he hasn't been elected mayor 3 days when he's bought an automobile, engaged 6 chauffeurs, and we the city have got to pay for it.
I don't blame you, Mrs. Williams, for thinking that way. The whole election was a fraud. At the right time and right place, I will expose to the whole of Jimtown that Harry Walton is the rightful mayor.
You will prove it? And who are you? Oh, I see.
My position here is a very peculiar one. Tom Sharper hired me to watch Sam Peck. Mrs. Peck hired me to watch Steve Jenkins. And when I got here, I found them robbing each other. But worst of all, my best friend, Harry Walton, being cheated.
Cheated?
Yes, cheated. As I said before, at the right time and right place, I will expose all. At the moment, we better not be seen together. So I'd advise you leave this office at once and leave everything in my hands.
I guess you're right, Mr. Penrose, for I don't care to come in contact with Steve Jenkins to begin with. Steve Jenkins, the mayor of Jimtown. Some joke.
Good morning, Miss Secretary.
Good morning, sir.
Is the mayor in?
No, sir, not yet. May I take your name?
No, thank you. I'll call later.
Very well, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Attention! His Honor, the Mayor of Jimtown.
At ease.
Your Honor, some gentleman from New York here to see you.
Some gentleman from where?
New York.
And where's that?
I don't know, that's not on my beat, sir.
Tell him come on in here.
Right this way, gentlemen. His Honor, the Mayor.
At ease.
How are you, Your Honor? We'd like to see you about a concert in the town hall.
Oh, well, since I've been elected mayor of Jimtown, I have appointed myself the Census Bureau. Therefore, I got to know the nature of this entertainment.
It is a singing concert.
Your Honor, I used to sing with these gentlemen.
Go on.
We would be pleased to sing for your pleasure.
Well, I might even join you. I used to do a little crooning myself.
Hear that old town clock a striking, Angeline. Suppose it's time that we were hiking, Angeline. I surely hate to leave you, honey, dear I do. For honey child, when you ain't near me, I
right time for turtle doving. Kisses taste much finer, hugging seems diviner, but I must leave you, honey, 'cause I am feeling funny. Good night, Angeline.
Hear that old church choir singing,
Angeline.
and hear that old sweet singing,
Angeline. We're all telling of our happy wedding day. No more, Angie, will I ever have to say good night, my Angeline. Farewell, my gal so fine. Leaving time is greeting time. I haste to part with my baby mine. Night time was made for some loving. It's the right time for turtle doving. Kisses taste much finer, hugging seems diviner, but I must leave you, honey, 'cause I am feeling funny. Good night, Angeline.
Woo! Hey, gal, come on down here and tell them about old Deacon Birch and that brown skin vamp down by the coat the other day. Woo! They ain't heard no scandal.
Deacon Birch of Mount Zion Church was held up into court. He was brought in by his wife, I think, in church with no support. His skin brown with jet black hair caused him to lose his head. And when the judge called him to speak, days in the words he said. If you've never been flanked by a brown skin, you've never been wrapped at all. For the vamping is black as a brown skin, and the vamping now there ain't no stone. Wake up, now they'll make you bring out a jail. A chocolate brown will make your temples get go well. To the ladies who sit down and you are long and tall, who make the same mistakes out in the desert fall. If you've never been flanked by a brown skin, you've never been flanked at all. Wake up, now they'll make you bring out a jail. A chocolate brown will make the temples get go well. But the ladies who skip brown, I mean are long and tall, who make the same mistakes out in the desert fall. If you've never been flanked by a brown skin, you've never been flanked.
Who's there? Hey, Sam. Is that you?
Yes. Tom, is that you?
What are you doing out here this time of night? What, you in the night force now?
Man, I'm all the force.
And who you looking for?
Slippery Jim.
Slippery Jim. He out already?
He ain't been locked up yet.
I thought he was the first person you put away when you got the job.
Oh, Tom, I wasn't thinking about locking him up.
Ain't we got some fine protection? Say, what's that you got in your hand there?
That's a lamp.
Next to Aladdin's lamp? That's the oldest thing I ever saw.
Aladdin's lamp? What you talking Aladdin's lamp?
You never heard of Aladdin's lamp?
No, Tom, I never heard. Tell of it.
Well, that was the old lamp they found. And when they rubbed it, a genie would come up. And any question they would ask him, he would answer. And any wish they would make, he would grant it. You see, if that was Aladdin's lamp, and you rubbed it and a genie came up, and you asked him where Slippery Jim was, he'd tell you exactly where to find him.
No, Tom, I don't want that.
Oh, but it was a marvelous lamp.
If I only had an oil lamp like Aladdin, with this mystic power from its mystic power, I'd call a genie to my side. Precious stones or riches would not be my wishes, but on bended knee I would implore a genie to let my conscience be his guide. I'm so lonely, and there's only one thing that will ease my mind. It's that land where gentle oriental maidens you will find. I've got those oriental blues. I've got those oriental blues. I'd like to take a trip across the China Sea to old Shanghai and sip a cup of China tea with my butterfly. Then spend the day at old Bombay, watching those Hindu maidens sway where the night repose. What grows? The Persian rose at dawn on an Arabian steed, at an Arabian speed. Let me whirl with the Bedouin girl, and in Cairo town I want to settle down. Oh, I've got those mysterious, call them delirious, oriental blues.
Oh, you are just the man I've been looking for.
At your service, madam.
Mr. Penrose, you've been here a long time, and you haven't reported to me as yet. You were in the store, and you must have found Steve stealing. That's how he was elected. But still, you haven't caught him.
Oh, I've caught him all right.
Well, why didn't you report it? He should have been arrested at once. The idea of him robbing my poor husband. He's nothing but a common thief. That's what he is.
I caught your husband robbing Steve.
Huh? You caught my husband robbing Steve? Well, now, who hired you? Me or Steve?
Can you keep a secret?
Of course I can. I'm a woman.
Tom Sharper hired me to watch your husband.
Well, Tom Sharper's too smart.
Not as smart as he thinks he is. When I got here, I found Steve robbing Sam, Sam robbing Steve, and the store clerk robbing both of them. And then I, in turn, robbed all three of them.
Oh, this is dreadful.
Here is the money. Give it to your husband and Steve. And tell them to be in that store tomorrow morning, ready to run business on the level.
Oh, that's impossible. They have to be at the mayor's office tomorrow morning.
No, not tomorrow morning. Harry Walton shall be in the mayor's office tomorrow morning.
Well, I don't understand this at all, Mr. Penrose.
Well, come with me, madam, and I will explain.
my baby dear will cuddle me, sing to me, cling to me, croon to me, spoon to me, sigh to me, cry to me. I'm craving for any kind of love.
here to me appear the mirror shades, the visions fade before my eyes. By day they taunt me, by night they haunt me. Sometimes I weep and sigh for my vision girl, my vision girl. Though we've only met in dreams, for you I'm lonely yet it seems. Your beauty you disclose like the fragrance of a rose. My vision girl, I'd give the world if I could be caressed in your oriental arms and be pressed to your sweet and gentle charms. My mysterious pearl, my vision girl.
Friends and citizens of Jimtown, we always knew that Harry Walton is the right man for the mayor. Let's welcome him tonight, each and every one of us, for he's all right.
He's all right.
Who's all right?
Harry Walton's all right.
Hooray, yeah.
Hooray! He is the right man in the right place. And tonight, I also introduce him as my future son-in-law.
I've been a thousand raggy, draggy dances that are dancing every hall and there. I've been a thousand raggy, draggy dances that are dancing every hall. But the best is one that was. It's called the Baltimore Buzz. You take it, baby, gently hold it. You lay your head up on the shoulder. You walk just like the legs are breaking. Go a Franco like a tango, then you start to shimmy, shimmy. You
we are very lucky to have with us an author, Mr. Cassim Gaines, and we're talking about his book, Footnotes, The Black Artists Who Rewrote the Rules of the Great White Way, which is a great title. And its connection to Shuffle Along, because Shuffle Along was historic in terms of another milestone in the journey of not just theater, but theater for people of color, for Black artists. So one of the first things we want to talk about here, Cassim, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. One of the first questions I wanted to ask, a little background on you for those who are not familiar with you or your work. Could you just give us a background in terms of your upbringing, what you're doing, and perhaps what inspired you to write this book?
Sure. So I am an educator. I am a theater lover, I will say as well. That doesn't make my official bio, but it's an important part of who I am. And I also am a cultural historian. So I write a lot about popular culture, entertainment, and really how it intersects with the greater culture and history. I have a background in American studies, and the way that I sort of describe that for people who may be unfamiliar is that it's really where history and sociology intersect.
Mhm.
And so really my interest in Shuffle Along really began when I saw George C. Wolfe's production of Shuffle Along, or the musical sensation of 1921 and all that followed. And I actually happened to see that show on the day before it closed, which was just by coincidence. I had the tickets and it just, they announced that it was going to be closing prematurely, and that just happened to be that performance. And I was fortunate enough to be part of a talk back afterwards and watching the actors talk about this production, the 2016 production I'm talking about, about that production, and feeling like it was this missed opportunity to fully establish Shuffle Along in history. It was a big, lavish production, but it closed after just 100 performances. It was nominated for 10 Tony Awards, but it lost in every single category to Hamilton, which came out that same year. And so there was sort of this sense that what had occurred to Shuffle Along and the artists who created Shuffle Along over almost 100-year period was happening yet again in this 2016 production. It was almost being buried and forgotten in real time. There was no cast recording. There is a production video that you can watch at Lincoln Center if you are a researcher, but otherwise it's not readily available to the public. And so when I got home and started just, reflecting on the show and doing Googling like we all do when we see something that I think, inspires us or sticks with us, I was amazed, I think, most at the fact that Langston Hughes came to New York. He chose to go to Columbia because he wanted to see Shuffle Along. And I think learning that really made me say there's so much more about this production than what occurred in 1921 or what occurred on Broadway. It had effects throughout all of Black culture and entertainment. And I felt like as an author, I had sort of a responsibility to pick up the baton and see if there was something I could do to help cement this history of this amazing, amazing work.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, what would you say in terms of your, this is sort of, you already sort of answered it in a way, but in terms of the inspiration for writing the book was this need to shed more light on this story and this journey. Why do you think that's important in 2021?
I think it's important because there is so much conversation about representation and the importance of it. And, you know, I think oftentimes in American history, we sort of, because of the way that we have been taught in schools, because of the stories that we have been told, it's easy to sort of feel like Black people were not present for certain moments in history or were excluded from certain spaces. You know, Broadway still, by and large, is a very white space. You know, it's every year it seems like we get some article about the diversity on Broadway. And what people don't realize is there were more Black people working on Broadway in 1924 than there are today.
Wow.
And so when you have a show like Shuffle Along, which has been effectively erased from history, it's not just that the show gets erased, but also every Black artist who maybe is a dancer, singer, writer who wants to write for the stage, they don't see themselves in that space because they don't know they've ever been there, that we've ever been there in that space. So I think it's important to remind the world that Shuffle Along existed because we are interwoven. We are more than interwoven. I think that we are the foundation of this country, and to not just have it be Rodgers and Hammerstein, Stephen Sondheim, you know, all of these other names that you might associate with musical theater history, but also to have U.B. Blake, Noble Sissle, Flournoy Miller, and Aubrey Lyles as a part of that tapestry as well is incredibly important. And I want to make one point too on that same question, which is this book I started working on really in 2017. So that was before all that occurred in 2020 with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. You know, that was really in a little bit of a different time and space. And I think that, yes, it's the centennial of Shuffle Along, but I think that what we've seen even since I started working on this book, there's such an increased sense of urgency that I feel in trying to remind as many people as possible that Shuffle Along existed and was incredibly important.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So definitely there's a need, not just in terms of the information, the history, but also in terms of the artists who are working in the industry that they need to know. I mean, I'm practicing, you know, educator, actor, director, and I'm just amazed at times, even with my students, but also with fellow artists in my field who don't know this history. And it's not just Black history or Black theater history, but it's American theater history. Could you shed some light, which I know you also do in your book, prior to Shuffle Along, what was the context in which this musical arrived? What was it in terms of Black theater prior to 1921?
Sure, great. So it's really important. Shuffle Along was the first all-Black musical to succeed on Broadway. And I make that little caveat to say to succeed, because if we're talking about Shuffle Along, you have to give all respect and honor to Williams and Walker, to Ernest Hogan, to people who were there before. What's really significant about Shuffle Along is there was a 10-year absence where there were no all-Black musicals on Broadway at all. The Black theater scene sort of went through a very unusual period around 1918, 1919, where there were a number of people who died. And unfortunately, they were really pillars of this emerging Black theater scene. One of the people that I will shout out that I didn't already mention is someone named James Reese Europe, who was an amazing band leader. You know, he didn't refer to himself this way, but if you look at what he did, essentially union organizer of Black musicians and artists, who was a real pioneer. I mean, there's there's a great book to read on James Reese Europe. The name of it is escaping me right now, but it's worth checking out because it's just a great biography. He is someone that people should know. And he really had a belief that Black artists would find the greatest level of success in this country, not by trying to imitate whites or assimilate to European white culture, but by remaining authentic to our roots, because we do best what comes out of our culture, our history. And the descendants of Europeans might do best what came out of their history and culture. So he was a real forward-looking person who fought for fair wages, fair accommodations for musicians. He wanted all of his performers to dress in tuxedos, which was not necessarily the custom at the time, but he really believed that we are going to not come in and be viewed as the help. We're going to come in and be viewed as artists who are supporting, whether it's the party or you're going to pay top dollar to see us on stage. Anyway, so with all that being said, UB Blake, Noble Sissle, Miller and Lyles, they really knew that they were adding to a legacy that had been established. But what was unique about Shuffle Along was the show was crafted in a way where it would appeal not only to Black audiences, but also to white audiences. And that was really what was revolutionary. The music was jazz. It was the first time that there was a jazz score on Broadway. It was the first time you had Black chorus girls that would come out on stage and be dancers, not just ornamentation, not just to be looked at, but actually they would sing, they would dance. There were great actresses in that show as well. There were suffragettes in that show. When you talk about what's going on culturally, there was a suffragette character. There was a flapper character. I mean, it was really of the time. And yet there were also elements that sort of harken back to the antiquated antebellum humor, which was palatable and acceptable to many upper class Broadway ticket price paying white patrons. So, it was unique in that. And I think one of the things that as a historian is frustrating to me about Shuffle Along is that that formula in the 1920s really just happened that one time. There were other all Black musicals, but the sort of lightning in a bottle really was Shuffle Along in 1921. That was a really long, sprawling answer to your question, but I hope I got to the heart of the question.
It's a great answer, and you did get to the heart of it. I just wanted to piggyback what you said in terms of the prior to Shuffle Along with Williams and Walker, that in the early part of the 20th century, around 1908, 1909, they had a couple of shows that were very popular with the audiences, but they were not on what we now typically call Broadway. That they were in New York, but they weren't at that, on the Broadway, Ziegfeld, Schubert theaters, any of those areas.
And some of them played on the street, but
exactly.
but in a 119 seat venue, a dollar ticket price. It was not, as you said, it was not Broadway. As UB Blake used to say, you could open a flea circus on the street of Broadway, and that doesn't make it a Broadway show. Not to say that those shows were flea circuses, but they did not meet the standard of what was really considered Broadway.
Yeah, and also the fact with the shows of the early 1900s up to 1910, that ragtime, that style of music was very popular. So with the, Scott Joplin era, that the music was different. And as you also mentioned, in terms of this carryover of the minstrelsy, that was something that even for Black performers, right, coming up in that time, this is what was expected. It wasn't until, the late 50s that you actually had Black comedians who did not perform without blackface. But this was the norm, so much so that there are a number of white artists who also donned blackface because this was the norm. And I think that with Shuffle Along, it's important to note originally those roles, particularly with Miller and Lyles, were done in blackface. And this was accepted, which is a hard pill to swallow, but that's the reality in terms of what, as you said, what white audiences were willing to accept and pay for. And the other thing that you mentioned in terms of the time period was the sense that with Shuffle Along, you had the sort of jazz age, but also the fact that they had their own struggles because they opened at the 63rd Street Theater, which was like the farthest one uptown, not technically part of Broadway. And it wasn't a Schubert or Ziegfeld house. It was sort of off the beaten path. But the fact that the show was so popular in 1921 that all of the white audiences, the white patrons, went up further uptown to see the show. So much so that they had to make, as the history books tell us, 63rd Street a one-way street because you had so much traffic and carriages trying to see this new Black show. So in that regard, it definitely changed the venue and the mark and picked up where Williams and Walker left off in that regard. And the other thing that you mentioned in terms of the different styles of music, that's one thing that I noticed even with our production, with Harlem Opera Theater, is that you have jazz, you have blues, you have a bit of gospel, you have sort of what we would call pop music, you have light opera. So it's a mixture of all those things, which was very unique for a Black show because it wasn't all minstrelsy. It wasn't all, as they say, coon songs, that they were romantic. There's a love story that's inherent in it. You have Black people who are in middle-class roles. They own hotels. They're store owners. They're not just maids and chauffeurs and cooks and working in the field. So exposing Black and white audiences to that in 1921 seemed to have opened up a whole nother perspective in terms of Black performers. And something else that you also mentioned in terms of, whether it's how the fates would have it that Bert Williams suddenly passed away in 1920. Florence Mills, who was part of the original cast in the chorus of Shuffle Along, passed away. So it's like there was almost like this changing of the guard. Right? Of this journey of, okay, here's the next generation. So, Noble and Sissel and Miller and Lyle seem to have entered the venue at the right time to carry on this journey, this storyline of what had gone before us. So it's very interesting that it sort of fell within that perspective. And one other thing, when we're talking about what else was happening in the 20s, what would you say in terms of, as you mentioned, women had just gotten the right to vote in 1920.
Some women.
Yes. And there were also a number of race riots.
Absolutely.
The number of lynchings was high. You had segregation still right in New York City. Typically, one of the things that I think we want to note is that typically for audiences if the theaters allowed blacks in the audience, they were in the balcony. The orchestra was reserved for white patrons. So this was one of those musicals where, for the first time, you have black patrons who are sitting in the orchestra, albeit still not in the same, purview of whites, a little behind, like the 10th row on or something of that nature. But the fact they were now on the same platform made a big deal, and it sort of changed that perspective. And the fact that you had just a wide variety of Black people who were in positions of technical theater. It wasn't just as actors on stage, but behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's significant. That this gave, way to, Black costumers, makeup artists, who were able to also work and make a living behind the scenes and give a venue to say, yes, we're not just on stage performers, we also have creativity behind the scenes as well. Could you shed some more light on that?
Sure. I mean, so I'll pick up on that last point first. One of the names that immediately sprang to my mind was a woman named Elida Webb, who was a chorus girl in Shuffle Along. And when Shuffle Along concluded and Miller and Lyles and Sissel and Blake went their own separate ways, and they each staged sort of rival productions. And they certainly felt that they were rival productions. They were they had significant beef at that time, so they were doing that. And Elida Webb went on to work on Runnin' Wild, and she was hired as the choreographer for that show, Black woman choreographer in the show that gave us the Charleston. She is the choreographer of that show, of which the Charleston comes out of. And so, when you think about the contributions of these Black, not just artists, but as you said, behind the scenes, they're so incredibly important. The other thing that came to my mind when you were saying that as well was, what was very unique was Sissel, Blake, Miller, and Lyles weren't just on the payroll, they were producers of Shuffle Along. And so they were incredibly wealthy by any standards, not just by, standards for Black folk at the time, but they were incredibly wealthy in the 1920s. And like a lot of people who find money very fast, it was often squandered. There were bankruptcies, there were issues, but for a period of time, they really were legitimate owners of that show. And when there were touring companies, they also got money from those ventures as well, those licensing deals.
Yes.
But I want to go back to what you were saying about the greater time period, about the lynchings, about just racism and Jim Crow that was going on throughout the United States, because this is one of the things that, I'll be honest with you, when I started writing this book, I did not anticipate would be as much of a character or a force in this book as it ended up being. Noble Sissel was a part of the Harlem Hellfighters, the 369th Infantry Regiment that went to Paris and fought in World War I. And when those Black soldiers came back, there were so many hate crimes against these Black soldiers, primarily because, and you can go back and find it in news articles throughout the United States, not just the Deep South, where there were people saying, there were white people saying to Black people, you can't wear that uniform. You take off that uniform. We're not going to have any, Black people, but of course they didn't say Black people, in that uniform. And these soldiers, in large part, went to fight overseas because you had thought leaders like Du Bois saying the best way to sort of prove our full citizenship in this country is to fight for this country. And certainly when we come back, our white brothers will recognize that we are just as American as they are. And that was not the case by and large. Noble Sissle himself, there's a story in the book of him being victimized on 2 separate accounts because he was in uniform. And so when we're talking about this period of time, it's not divorced from what's going on in 1919 was called the Red Summer because there were so many lynchings during that period of time. The other thing that was going on and certainly impacting New York as it is today, 100 years later, was the pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, which by 1921 was not fully gone in New York.
Yes.
And it's harrowing to look at, but you can go back and find in the news articles from that period, concerns about, people having mask wearing fatigue. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, in a sense. And what that did to New York's economy, there was prohibition. And prohibition, I don't know if it's always thought about in these terms, but New York State derived something like 25% of its total income from the sale of alcohol prior to prohibition. So when prohibition was enacted, it further decimated New York's economy. So you had all of these things taking place at the same time. And then it's important to mention that I think it's 8 days. I think it's just outside of 1 week after Shuffle Along opens in New York. In Tulsa, you have that race massacre, also in 1921.
Yes.
So it's, Noble Sissle was asked why he felt like with all of these headwinds against Shuffle Along, this show managed to succeed. And he sort of had 2 separate thoughts about it. One was the Black community and even people, the larger community were experiencing so much hardship. They were looking forward to something that was just fun. It was escape. It was enjoyable. And the artists were really talented. That needs to be said. But the other thought that he had was Shuffle Along showed an aspect of Black people being people, as you mentioned before, middle class being store owners, hotel owners, being in love, which was a controversial idea at the time, that they were free to be people in Shuffle Along. And at the same time, white audiences and Black audiences didn't feel like it was a message show. They weren't going there to be preached to. They were going there for entertainment. And Noble Sissle felt like that, by and large, led significantly to the show's success. But the one other thing I want to mention, going back to what you were saying about Miller and Lyles being in blackface, I really believe that this is a large part of what has led to Shuffle Along being erased from history, because it does have this, no pun intended, dark element of blackface as a part of its nucleus. Not every character in Shuffle Along was in blackface. In fact, very few of them.
Right. Yes.
But I know growing up in the 1980s, there were movements like, there was speculation that like Bill Cosby had bought the rights to the Little Rascals, and that he had, pulled a bunch of Little Rascals comedies because there was racially insensitive material. And there was comments, certainly, I don't think this is uncommon for people to look at performers like Hattie McDaniel and Stepin Fetchit and people like that and say, like, these are bad examples of Black performers, and we're going to not play these films on television, and we're going to sort of bury them and erase them. And I think what that misses is that they were performing, they were acting, they had a craft, and they were also gaining entry into what was previously all white spaces. And yes, like I would certainly hope that 100 years after Gone with the Wind, Black women weren't still limited to playing a mammy, but to not acknowledge that Hattie McDaniel was an actress who was a skilled performer, who was opening a door that other people were able to walk through and open even further behind her is important. It's not to say, you know, we should be able to look back at where we were and say, isn't it great that we have progressed since then?
Well, I definitely agree. And one thing I want to also piggyback on that when it came to, I know with Bill Cosby, when he, I believe it was Amos and Andy, the original Amos and Andy episodes, and it wasn't to sort of put them away, but his point was to control how they are being used. It is that, yes, we need to see this and understand what it was like, but also for educational purposes to say, yes, this is what we did. And also the context that, you know, even in 2021, some would argue and debate that we're still seeing elements of minstrelsy. We're not in blackface, but we're still sort of promoting the stereotypes. You know, the dope pusher, you know, poor black, pitiful black woman who's the victim, or the angry black woman, or the sassy black woman.
And colorism, certainly, you know.
And that's issue in terms of colorism that will shuffle along, for the most part. Looking at the pictures, photographs is something that we talked about with our cast. All the performers are light-skinned. The chorus girls specifically light-skinned. In fact, Josephine Baker, who started out as just a chorus girl, was seen as being too dark by the other chorus girls. So this idea of colorism, you know, Burt Williams, who had to don blackface to perform with Williams and Walker in 1908, light-skinned, but be a comedian on stage, he had to wear blackface. You know, Miller and Lyles, right? Were not dark-skinned, as we would say, in that regard. So the fact that this was something that was, you know, a norm, it was sort of normalized. Yes, people were aware of, you know, the symbolism behind it, but it was also the thing of, this is my performing self, and I can separate this from the person. Like Hattie McDaniels was very famous for saying, you know, I'd rather get paid for playing a maid than being a maid. So, and she gave a lot of money to Fisk and Howard University in terms of supporting scholarships for these Black students. Stephen Fetchit was another one that people don't know that, yeah, this is what I did because I had to do it. But it gave me a venue to open up other doors. Had there not been a Hattie McDaniel or Butterfly McQueen or Stephen Fetchit, we would not have seen a Dorothy Dandridge or Sidney Poitier, Halle Berry or Denzel Washington or Viola Davis. So that aspect in terms of someone has to sort of lay the seed for the journey, and we have to build on that. So I think with Shuffle Along, it was part of that journey because Josephine Baker, she stayed with the show. You know, Paul Robeson was in the show. So here are, you know, Black performers who are, not all of them are, you know, light-skinned and that aspect. So the fact that, you know, we're still dealing with that issue, but the fact that we're opening up doors, and even then, doors were being opened in terms of saying, see, we're in all shades. You might just see one, but we're in all shades. And I think that's an important element.
I want to add on to that point because one of the things I found in my research, and it was such a stunning article written by Claude McKay, no less, and he was celebrating Shuffle Along and said that he really enjoyed the show, but it was almost an open letter to Miller, Lyles, Sissel, and Blake saying, why not have dark-skinned Black women on stage? Because we know in the community that Black women come in all shades and colors, and Black is beautiful, literally using that phrase, Black is beautiful, but white people don't know it. And what an opportunity this show would be to introduce white people to the full array of Black beauty on stage and let them see, Black women of the the color spectrum, tap dancing, singing, wearing those costumes. And ultimately that wasn't the decision that was made, but I just thought it was startling. And there's something else. The exact year is evading me. I want to say it was 2009, around there, maybe a little bit earlier, but there was something I wrote about in the book where August Wilson was asked shortly before he died about the potential of staging Shuffle Along in its original iteration back on Broadway. And there was a white producer, Jack Vertel, who is still a very important Broadway producer, who was thinking about doing this. He had never heard of Shuffle Along before. He had discovered it. He started researching it. He said, this is amazing, and it's a watershed moment for Blacks. Jack Verdell is not Black, but he said, wouldn't it be great to sort of celebrate this show? But I think there would be some blowback, and I can see that. And so what do you think, August Wilson? And August Wilson, I think, had such an interesting perspective where he said, it's not only about Black people seeing Shuffle Along, but if white audiences go to see Shuffle Along and know that this show is a part of a legacy of Blackface in this country, and that causes white people discomfort, that's important too. That white people should also know what Black people had to do to gain entry into these spaces, what parameters were put on them. Because oftentimes when we talk about this, it's, well, Black performers had to do this, and we just sort of say it without saying the other part, which was, who made them have to do it? Why did they have to do it? Why wouldn't white audiences go see someone in their natural skin tone telling jokes, or without a deep Southern drawl, or eating watermelon, or what, why was that? It's not that these Black performers woke up and said, this is what I want to do, I think that'll work. They knew that was the only thing that would work, because many of them had tried it the other way, or were not allowed to try it the other way.
Yes.
And so August Wilson sort of said, it's okay. And actually, I think in the 2016 Shuffle Along that George Wolfe did, I actually thought there was a little bit of a missed opportunity to not put these kind white theater goers who were spending $200 to go see a Broadway show in a little bit more discomfort. I think too many people left that show saying, I went to a wonderful history lesson, but they missed some of that history. I think there were some concessions that were made, right, to make it a little...
It was very safe.
Right.
Safe, and as you said, making people feel comfortable. And that's why, even when I was asked to direct the show, and I was doing my own, because I'm a historian, I got my doctorate from NYU in Performance Studies, and I had studied the Negro Actors Guild as my dissertation topic. And there's a lot of overflow.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's a great topic.
Thank you. Yes. And Noble Sissel was one of the founders of the Negro Actors Guild. In fact, he was the first president of the Negro Actors Guild back in 1936. And just seeing that growth in that area of these Black performers who were, even in 1936, still, putting on blackface, still not really equally part of the Broadway stage. when Bert Williams did the Ziegfeld Follies, it was a separate act. He was not allowed to interact, touch the white performers. It was his bit. And once he was done, okay, the rest of the show went on. Or when, Flo Ziegfeld bought the last act, the final scene from Running Wild, and put it in the Ziegfeld Follies with white performers doing that. I think in some ways it's also symbolic of the power, the influence of Black artists and Black music that initially, even with minstrelsy, all right, the original so-called minstrels were Black people, former slaves who were going around the country trying to make some money. That was their hustle, right? Very successful at it until you had white performers said, oh, that looks like fun. Let me try that. And at one point, they're more popular and more in demand than the Black performers. So then we had this, creation of white performers putting on blackface to play Black people and do Black music, and what their perception of Black music and the stereotypes of, the overdone expressed language and what have you. And it's almost like, wow, look how we're treated, look how we're oppressed, yet and still you are appropriating our culture, our style, and putting it on your stages to make money off of us, which is interesting because one might argue in 2021, we're still seeing that. But the fact that you had these performers who were doing this because it was, their love, right? But also they were also in many ways taking a stand. Even someone as Paul Robeson, who I always remember in his autobiography, was saying, and here I stand. It's like for the artist, you were already social, you're already political. People were saying, oh, artists should not be doing stuff, that's going to be political, and his point was, with the very fact that people look at you and they see you, it already becomes socio-political. So you cannot pretend and say it's not obvious that you're the only Black person in the show, or something that you said with your character that sticks out. So I think that there's a lot of information here of education for people, but also part of that education is being uncomfortable for both Blacks and whites, of looking at these images in retrospect and understanding where the conversation is coming from. People say, you know what, that offends me. You want to know why? Let's go back and look at this. This is why this offends me. So I think that there's that lesson to be learned with a show like Shuffle Along, that's part of our experience and our culture. And just one more thing that you mentioned in terms of the Chorus Girls, that this was one of the shows where you had chorus girls who were in nice costumes, right? Even undergarments, right? Garters, stockings. It was top of the line. Whereas traditionally, we had what was called the Toba circuit, for a lot of Black artists starting out, like Ethel Waters and Lena Horne and Louis Armstrong, where it was like, you get what you can get. So you had stockings with runs in them, and clothes with sweat stains and used stuff, and it's tattered and worn. But this is a show people went to where you saw people in tuxedos, evening gowns, silk, nice clothes, nice fashion, which is a nice contrast to say, with all the things happening outside the theater around the country at this time, on this stage, you have Jimtown a
Mhm.
fictional Black town where Black people are in positions of authority, right? Positions of esteem. There's a class society even within
Mhm.
Jimtown,
And it's
you
not
know.
dependent on white people.
Yes,
Not in
yes,
contrast. It's just separate. It's just a complete separate thing.
yes. And I think that that's one of the reasons why, yes, we need to see, we need to hear about Shuffle Along. Um, but we also need to understand about Williams and Walker
Mhm.
and in Abyssinia and in Dahomey and A Trip to Coontown, because these shows sort of set the stage of where we're going. And to
Mhm.
come from there and to come to August Wilson,
Mhm.
or Alice Childress, Trouble in Mind,
Mhm.
or Slave Play,
Mhm.
Fire in My Bones. And it's like, okay, yeah, we've evolved. Look how far we've come. It's always been there. But the question of now, the rest of the world is saying, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, now I have a perspective here. So the next time that we as artists step on that stage, we have some education, we have some backing, and we're not just coming out and doing our bit and then exiting. But it's like, you know what you're representing, right?
Mhm.
There's a history there, and you've got to understand that. And that's some of the elements that we try to bring out in our production with the Harlem Opera Theater, um, was to make it authentic to these artists, to these characters,
Mhm.
right? That for the actors, these are real people,
Yeah.
and that they could see themselves, that the audiences could see themselves or aspire to see themselves. Maybe I could own a hotel. Maybe I could run for office.
Mhm.
You know, maybe I could, have these nice things and have furs and silks and be a flapper. And look at that. So I think that history is illuminating, it's exciting, it's educational, it's controversial, and all of that, we can gain from it. So I thank you for the book, and I thank you for sharing it with us. Now, could you just tell us, if one wanted to get access to your book, tell us about that. How does one get access to your book?
Sure. So the book is Footnotes, The Black Artist Who Rewrote the Rules of the Great White Way. And it is wherever books are sold. So it's on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or your local shop local. Go to your favorite local bookstore. They should have it. If not, they should be able to get it. It just came out this year for the centennial of Shuffle Along.
Wonderful. Now, what else are you working on? Any
So
upcoming projects?
I do have some upcoming projects, and I can say also, I guess the one thing that I'll sort of tease, I can't say too much about it, but I will say that Footnotes has been optioned for a television miniseries. So I'm hoping that this story of Shuffle Along, it looks like we may be able to experience and trap it in some amber in a different format moving forward. So if you want to be one of those people that says, like, I read the book first, go
Excellent.
check it out. But hopefully that seems like it's moving forward, and I think that's all I can say.
Or one of us might be in it.
Yes, I will definitely look if things move forward. I promise I'll be in touch with you, because I want to it's I feel so strongly about the importance of shouting from the rooftops about this show, and everything that you just said about it being illuminating and beautiful and controversial. That's history. That's history. That's Black history. That's America. And I think that Shuffle Along, I always say, it isn't the example, it's just an example of Black excellence, of Black turmoil in some cases, of Black erasure, of Black representation. There are so many other examples of maybe not shows or films or books or entrepreneurs or business people that have reached Shuffle Along type levels of success. But there are stories like this throughout American history. And so, you know, anything I can do to help amplify those stories. And I'm so truly thankful and excited that you all are staging this production, because I hope everyone involved with this production knows how important it is. It's so important, not just for the run of your show, but it's important that it existed so that people can go back and say, in Harlem, we did this show at this time to celebrate this moment. It's crucial. And I thank you all for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.